Thank you so much, Selma. That was really awesome. Really informative. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes break for some questions from the audience. I've summarized some of the questions that we got during Biki's presentation. Biki, there was a question from the audience: is what is the average age of a principal investigator in SADC countries?
The actual age.
Yeah, the average age.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily answer it to say the actual average age, but what we know is that we have what we call an aging investigators. Our investigators are quite old. Yeah, so they're not my age mostly. They're older than maybe about 15 to 20 years older than me. Yeah.
That's what I can further add on to what Biki is saying. I've seen it now constantly with young professionals in our industry, is that we are now attracting as well more BSc students from university in developing them into being clinical research associates, but from an investigator point of view, those young investigators coming through, especially the specialists in our countries. So that is something that is really interesting to me. And then now actually it fits onto the second question from the audience: is are we attracting a younger generation into clinical research, Biki? How lucrative?
Look, I'll base my experience in South Africa. So there's been new sites that are coming into the space of clinical trials, but I think the biggest challenge it's the changes that the sponsors are also implementing at a higher level, because the sponsor needs reliability. They need to go to the sites that they know, and then they also are building center of excellences. So most of the sites now, they want center of excellences, and they also want to reduce the number of sites in a clinical trial. So if you look at all those things, it acts up against capacity building. So in South Africa, we have a policy for capacity building, which has been very beneficial, because for each and every clinical trial that is submitted, we do request for an element of capacity building, which can be defined by the addition of a new site or a new investigator. So there is a bit of activities to build into that. Yes.
Thank you, Selma. I can ask you exactly the same question on at the other African continents. Is there strategies or programs in place to attract young professionals or young individuals to come into clinical research space?
Yes, definitely, yes. And I'm so glad to see more and more young doctors. I can list Dr. Hafisi Kibuka in Uganda, Dr. Saram Kali in Ghana. I have Dr. Ajili in Tunisia. And I see here also I'm talking as a CRO person, we have a key role here, because especially when we attract, there's a new profile of sponsor coming that didn't work previously in Africa, they can hear us. And for me as director of operation, I highly believe in this young people potential. Plus, we started receiving comment from Health Authority about the load of this key opinion leader. We received rejection of some site because they are too loaded. In addition to this, we have this problem of PI oversight. That we know how it became key. Previously, when I started working back 16 years ago, even in France, the clinical research was taken by the key opinion leader, the head of department. No one can even have a talk with them, or you as a CRA never meet them. But things changed when we started receiving audit. They are assessing the PI oversight, and we were receiving major finding. Now they are convinced that they can't be everywhere, and we don't want them everywhere, really.
That's true. Selma, just a comment from, I think it's Nachit. So thank you, Selma, for the presentation that reflects an important part of the reality of clinical trials in Africa and relevant changes. So that's just a comment from the audience. Perhaps, Vicky, I'm coming back to you on the third question that was raised from the audience. It is, how does clinical research contribute to economic development agenda of the SADC countries?
All right, that is really a great question because
Yeah.
it's something at SACRA we're also very passionate about. We actually did a study which we need to publish, just need time to actually finish up to assess how clinical trials contribute into the development economic contribution. So firstly, what we found is that obviously, first of all, it's the creation of employment in the place where the clinical trial is conducted. Secondly, it's the other benefits of clinical trials, the other services that are connected to clinical trials when you look at the traveling. So we touch also when it comes to the logistics, and that create a further input. Furthermore, we looked at, we found that obviously when the participants are participating in clinical trials, especially people that are dependent on chronic medication, at that duration when they are participating in clinical trials, they are not reliant on the government. And we know that in South Africa, more than 80% of people are reliant on the government. So if we were to do more clinical trials and having clinical trials as a point of care, we could even do more. So there's a lot of economic contribution of clinical trials. I mean, if you look at what is happening, I don't know with you, Selma, out there, but in South Africa now, we have a lot of vacancies. It's like we don't know where to find resources.
It's the same here in the whole Africa and even Middle East. Now it's a competition, and I think it's worldwide because I can see in LinkedIn, even in Europe now, they are offering bonus when you sign. So even for CRA position. So we are lucky to be in this field.
Yeah.
But with the COVID-19 speed, we don't even have time to train people. This is the where it's really tricky.
But that shows that we have been the whole issue about the old investigator. It's not necessarily impacting the old investigator. It's basically old resources when it comes to clinical trials, or maybe because for the past 5 years, if I looked at the graph of clinical trials that were coming into South Africa, there was a serious decline. And now it's like we are going into like 5 times more clinical trials than what it was in 2018, 2019. Yeah, so we're having a serious challenge there.
Completely agree. Selma, there was actually another question for you from the audience. What gives a country a competitive advantage in attracting clinical trials? Perhaps you can give it from your perspective in other African countries.
Yeah, look, what I can attract the sponsor is the cost per patient. This is one key element. Then, of course, the incidence of the disease, the presence of qualified site, previous experience, audit finding, experience with inspection. But most of it is the timeline to start, especially now. Now we talk only about when they start. You know, many times they come to us, especially currently I'm working with many Chinese sponsors. When they come, it's already too late because they want you to start in 1 month. And for us, we are saying, Africa, never 1 month. You are just saying hello. So, and with the complexity, the translation, this local language, that or the time they start understanding that some language they are spoken, not written, and that we, the whole team, we can't speak, we have consent. For me, it's like a drawing. So, really the timeline of when we can start.
But can I add on to the timeline? I think when you look at us in Africa, we are comparable with other countries. And sometimes we appear as though we're not. If you look at the timelines in China, you look at the timelines in India, there's been a lot of improvement as well. But we are very much comparable. And I think the main issue that maybe we need to start doing is visibility. We are not visible on what we do. We're not out there. There's lots of publication when it comes to clinical trials. Like there's a pink sheet, for example, which publish clinical trials matters. We're not there. When you go to the clean regs, for example, which you also publish, there's not all African countries that are on clean regs. So how do we find a way of making ourselves out there with the amount of work that we do. And now with a diversity, we should be taking the spotlight. But even the diversity, when it's being discussed, is mainly discussed in looking at America, you know. But we can expand the challenges that they have. They can bring it to us, if I may put it that way.
Yeah. I can enlist about this diversity. You know, for example, when they build the ECRF, usually we are other. They don't know where to rank us. And we say, for example, in Tunisia, we are Caucasian. No, you are not Caucasian. But what? Put yourself others. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it's and I think what is also make things complex for us is that there are only few African sponsors. Because I can share with you, one time I had a trial with the medical director was from Egypt, so he accepted to wait and to understand the regulation. The regulation is in Egypt is a nightmare because we need to seek the army approval to export. But when you have someone from the main stakeholder from the country, they can understand. When it's a foreign one, it's so hard already, but they are not that open. And when you start saying and listing this layer, you lose them.
Awesome. Thank you, Selma and Yaleti, for this session. This was very insightful, and the comments from the audience as well. Thank you for this insightful presentation.